Hi everyone, I think it's good morning still, isn't it? It's not quite afternoon yet. So lovely to see so many of you here today in the virtual room. I hope you're enjoying the event so far. I think we've had some fabulous sessions and a fabulous keynote from Lenny at the beginning of the proceedings. So the session that you're in at the moment is centered around Advanced HE Fellowship. And before we kick off, we'll just do a bit of housekeeping. So if everyone can make sure that their cameras and their microphones are off unless they are speaking. If you have any IT problems, if you go out of the session and come back in, hopefully that will resolve it. As we've said in previous sessions, we're trying to get feedback from participants around how the NTDC can better support you as individuals, as teams and as institutions, and Sarah will be putting the Padlet link in the chat shortly for you to engage with, hopefully. So if you have any questions throughout the session that we've got now that are centered around Advanced HE, if you also post those in the chat, we will have the opportunity at the end of the session to answer them. So I'm going to introduce our speakers now for this morning's session. So first of all, we've got James Davoll from Newcastle University. So James is technical manager there in the School of Arts and Culture, and he's also a fellow of Advanced HE, which is not surprising really, is it? His teams support and teach across 3 departments, which are fine art, media and music. And we're also joined by Chris Little, who is senior lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University. He's part of the Teaching Academy unit and co-leads the Institutional Professional Standards Framework programme. So all good stuff. Really fabulous to have James and Chris with us here today. And I think, James, you're going to kick off first by sharing your screen. Hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully that's the right screen you're seeing. Managed to skip a few slides ahead of the game. So firstly, just thanks very much for everyone to attend. I know there's 2 other talks going on, one around LEAF and also the one that I was interested in to hear about how the Manchester School of Art technicians hung that massive artwork. So I'll crack on with kind of my perspective and kind of what I was going to chat about Advanced HE at Newcastle University. But I've always thought I would kind of demystify some of these things. So is Advanced HE Fellowship for technicians? Yes, it is. It's for anyone involved with direct teaching in higher education. Does my day-to-day activity count? Yes, absolutely. It's exactly your day-to-day activity that is your contribution to gaining fellowship to HEA. And is it important? Well, I think it's important. Yeah, I think it raises the visibility of what we as technicians contribute to our institutions. I think it shows a commitment to professionalism. And is it hard? Well, no, I don't think it is hard. Because basically what the point of doing the Advanced HE is it's a reflective journey, and it's a reflection on what it is that you do in your workplace and how you help support teaching or deliver teaching, as the case may be. And it's getting more and more important as well with things like TEF assessments coming up. And it's getting more and more desirable within further and higher education as far as showing a professionalism, showing a status. It's not a PGCE, but it is governed by the UK PSF, which is the UK Professional Standards Framework. So it is recognising your practice as professional, contemporary, and of a level that is expected. So I thought I'd show a case study of a technician that I have in my team that has gained his fellowship. So this is Matt Robinson. He's our film technician. He joined the team that I lead basically the same time I joined. We had a new program, which was film. And very quickly, it became clear that his contributions to those programs were vital as far as delivering camera and audio demos, inductions, and supporting students on the kind of day-to-day. Because there was only 2 of us that were kind of linked to these 2 new film programs, we also saw we had a lack of resource as far as people. So we started making crib sheets and videos, which made up part of his application. He liaises with academics about what kit to buy. He has no formal teaching qualification beforehand, but he absolutely was reflecting and thinking about how he goes about himself and how he supports the students. And that's what made his case study for gaining his fellowship to HEA. So why a guide? So Matt and I did our fellowship at the same time, and we found, with all due respect to UK PSF, it's a really good document that they've pulled together. But for technicians, we're not used to this level of language. I also feel that for technicians, if it doesn't say it on the label, we kind of turn off to it. We don't think it's for us. And we think it's to do with academics, and we think it's to do with teaching, but it's not. It's to do with supporting teaching within HE. So I chatted to two great colleagues of mine here at Newcastle, Paul Fleet and Rosa Spencer, both who help with our Learning, Teaching, Development Centre. And we basically had a quick discussion, and Paul and I went away and we thought about reassessing the framework. So looking at it from a technician's perspective, what would help technicians to engage in this more? What would make them feel it's maybe something that they can achieve rather than not? Because I thought it was really important. Like, I saw my team, so I've got 17 individuals supporting teaching in their day-to-day, whether it be like loaning equipment, but they absolutely were supporting the journey that the students on our programs were having. So we looked at the associate fellow and fellowship. So there are 4 levels of fellowship, I believe, but these are the two, like the first stages. So an associate fellowship, there are 5 areas of activity, and an associate fellow needs to identify at least 2. There's also core knowledge to do with within the framework, and again, the associate fellow needs to talk to a minimum of 2 of these, which is the kind of core knowledge 1 and 2, which we'll look at in a second, as well as a commitment to appropriate professional values. For a fellowship, you need to hit all of them. So here are this is the current framework. This is the statements that you need to respond to, basically. But as technicians, we're used to being asked questions, and this is a reflective process. And I feel that being asked a question automatically instigates a reflection within the individual, within myself. So what we did was we started looking at each of these. So teach and support learning. So what would that look like to a technician, and how can we frame that as a question? So we changed this to kind of, how do you engage your learners? So we did this with the core knowledge, and we did this with the professional values as well. And then we got feedback, and then we adjusted it. So we're actually on version 2 of this kind of like support document, which colleagues have been using. So this is the fresh adjustment criteria that we've got in place. And again, we're making them questions rather than statements, because like I say, we deal with those. I'm more than happy to go into a little bit more of them, but some of the values are quite difficult to get your head around as far as what it is they're actually looking for. But the main thing is that the areas of activity, and every technician that is out there that is dealing, front end in front of the students, we are doing all of these things. We prepare sessions, we engage learners, we give feedback, and we have to create a safe environment for them to do so. And then we have qualifications, and we continually evolve. That's kind of, personally, that's why I'm at a university, because I get these questions and I have to kind of think on my feet, and I learn every day. So what we've been trying to do at Newcastle was we ran some workshops with colleagues in the Faculty of Medical Science and SAGE, so our engineering school, about what kind of activities count. And basically it's everything. It's any situation where you are directly engaged with a student, whether it be in a class or not, whether it be formal or informal. So whether that's loaning equipment, showing processes, or setting up a
Just
room.
gone on mute, James.
Marvelous. Am I still on mute?
I can hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, great. So what I was getting at was basically all activity works. Whether you're setting up a print studio in an art department, whether you're setting a chemistry lab in the chemistry department, whether you're drilling and tapping in engineering, you go about the process in a way to help students learn. You don't just kind of, I'll use a woodworking example. If I was showing someone how to use a belt sander, I wouldn't just turn it on, walk away and leave them to it. I would take them through the correct procedure. So 1, so it's safe; 2, so they understand; and 3, so they can come back and do it again. They can repeat it. I'm also assessing and giving feedback when I'm giving that induction. I'm seeing if they are using it and they've taken on board what I've done. And that hits all of the criteria. So we ran some workshops, and these are the kind of notes that we gathered. So we asked technicians to kind of identify these situations where they are preparing material or engaging learners. And we got this huge kind of smorgasbord of activity that people are doing. And it was really quite inspiring and incredible to see the diversity of what we do as technicians in HE. So I'm going to begin to wrap up. So what's in it for me? It validates what you do in your role, gives you an opportunity to reflect. It shows your professionalism in learning and teaching. It's a recognized expertise now. It's a status that you can bring with you. You get it post-nominal letters. Who doesn't like a little letter after their name? Fees wise, shouldn't cost you anything, as most institutions are members. And they'll also have support set up, as in what Chris will kind of discuss about MMU. And the other thing I was going to mention is, if anyone is going down to Nottingham, I'll be running a workshop on this, where hopefully we'll demystify a little bit and we'll look at some of the activities that technicians do and see which areas of activity they lie in. So I will end there, slightly ahead of schedule. Awesome.
Bro, cheers, James. Could you end your screen share for me and I'll jump on? Awesome. Cheers.
Pleasure.
Okay, could someone just confirm that they can see my screen, please?
Yeah, we can see it. Chris,
Awesome.
just need to start the slideshow.
Yeah, will do. Awesome. Right, thanks for that. And before I go any further, it is really worth saying that the language and the process of reflection, James was very kind and very measured in how he talked about the PSF document. It alienates a lot of people, not just technical staff. And we've actually been using James's documents with all of our potential PSF fellow, associate fellow, senior fellow people, to demystify that language. So I'll talk to you now a little bit about the scheme that we have at MMU. So the PSF accreditation scheme, the Advanced HE Fellowship scheme, however it's known at MMU, is available to people who want to apply for associate fellow, fellow, senior fellow, and principal fellow. And each of those different levels have different kind of requirements. So associate fellow and fellow is about, how much you interact with students. It's about your impact on students and on learning. And then senior fellow is more about your influence on colleagues. And principal fellow is about, the kind of strategic influence you might have across a university or in the sector. For all of our levels of fellowship at MMU, people can submit either through a traditional sort of written application, or they can do it through a presentation to a panel. And by panel, I mean 2 of my team. So it's not a lot. And then if people at senior fellow level, and we're looking to roll this out to other levels further down the line, there is a kind of professional discussion / dialogue route available to colleagues as well. So I thought I'd talk a little bit more to that thing around the language and the process and who it's for, because when I joined MMU, and this is no disrespect to who ran the process before, but it was very closed to people outside of lecturer or teaching fellow or researcher roles. It was, so technical staff, third space staff like learning developers or study skills tutors or learning technologists, as well as technicians, seemingly only had associate fellow available to them at MMU. So the first thing we did was remove all of that, because it's nonsense. Anyone can get any level of the PSF accreditation, regardless of their role. There's no specification on number of hours or marking or must have created X amount of Moodle areas or, or anything like that. It's really about the work. So going back to James's kind of opening gambit of, does my work count? Of course. So for anybody here who gets associate fellow, goes for fellow, and thinks that's it for you. No, it's not. Absolutely not. If you then become someone who helps colleagues to organize their technical work, or you help them through things like fellowship and associate fellowship or other accreditations, then that's senior fellow work there. So it's all available. And what we wanted to do from the very beginning, myself and my colleague Stephanie Aldred, who were made the co-leads in January at MMU, we really wanted to open up this offer of fellowship and at all levels, really, to anybody in an academic related role. And it goes back to that thing that James said of, if you're working with students, anything you do with them, that counts. It all counts, absolutely. So what we did was we looked at collaborating between Natalie and myself, and the form of the provision then changed. What we decided to do was, rather than leave it as a kind of apply whenever you want, do it in your own, sort of do it in your own time, do it by yourself, completely independently, we wanted to offer a series of experiential workshops to our technical staff to give them create a community through which they can kind of speak to each other and bounce ideas off one another, but to also support them through the use of those documents, because that language can be quite challenging. Although I have to say, using the guide from James and his colleagues, it's not very challenging anymore, which is brilliant. So the workshops took the form of a kind of open introductory briefing where I went along and spoke to pretty much all of our technical staff at MMU. And then those who were interested signed up to a series of workshops. And we kind of ran these sort of like typing pools almost, So what we would do is, say, for example, at Associate Fellow, we have a few parts of written activity that they need to do. They have to write a 250-word biography, and then they write a grid of activity where they map sort of between 6 and 10 of the kind of activities they do on a day-to-day basis to the PSF. And then these reflective case studies that deal with, 2 of the areas of activity. So in those writing workshops, say workshop 1, what we would do is talk through the requirements of that biography and the opportunities for it to really set the application off on the right format, and perhaps build a kind of writing frame for people to use. And then people would have half an hour to go and write it. And then they'd come back and share it with one another, and we'd say, yeah, that looks really good, or we could do a little bit more here to help. And we did the same with the grid, and we did the same with the individual case studies as well. What we also supplemented that with was kind of some outside of workshop stuff. So if people wanted to submit their stuff privately to me for a little bit of informal feedback, then that was okay as well. Once those workshops were done, we made some drop-in time available with myself, sort of like office hours almost, but timetabled on a specific day. If you've got any questions or you've done something, you want to have a look at it with someone, come along, I'll be available. And the take up for that was quite good as well. And we deliberately gave a very short submission window. So the scheme at MMU means that anybody can submit their application at any time through the year, and they'll get it assessed and turned around and back to them within 6 weeks. So, but what we've found with that here and other institutions is that what that tends to do is have a lot of people starting this and not finishing it. So what we decided to do, Natalie and I, was to have a short window. So we started these workshops in May, and we said, right, by the end of June, we want you to have it all done and submitted. And actually, most people stuck with that. There was a few kind of roadblocks chucked up with COVID and workload and annual leave and stuff like that, because a lot of people, particularly technical staff, have been doing multiple sessions over the past year, whereas they would have perhaps done one before, because of social distancing, multiple groups, etc. So generally, I'd say about half of the people who made it through to that point stuck to that submission window, and the others have done it over the sort of month or so after that. So that's a lot quicker than most people do it when they do it independently. I'm delighted to say that, when I spoke to the technical staff, there was a lot of interest in this, but I think people are kind of picking their moments. Then we had 12 people come to the first writing workshops and stick with it through, and we've had 5 people successfully gain associate fellowship, or in one case fellowship, which isn't massive numbers yet, but for a first run of this, it's a really, really positive step. And going back to some of the things that James said, it is growing. The requirement to have something like this in academic related roles and technical roles. And, it's estimated now that 50% of all academic or academic related staff have some level of advanced HE fellowship. They recently announced this week that advanced HE had just surpassed 150,000 fellows globally, with the majority of those coming at associate and fellow level. So it's a real opportunity to join a growing community of people where it's the norm for people to have those letters after their name now, or it's going to become the norm, I suspect. And what it basically does is it's not about creating any new work. The process should just be about reflecting on the wonderful work you do with students. And actually, one of the best things about it is that I've found this anecdotally through my work with colleagues, but the research says that most people who go through this process actually find it really rewarding and, not to get too fluffy about it, but empowering, reflecting on what you do and saying, actually, yeah, this is proper teaching. This is proper giving feedback to learners. And it is as good as any lecturer's work, because it is. It's a really rewarding process. I thought I would sort of show you, this is one of the things, this is a slide from one of my workshops that I did with the technical staff, how we use James's work to sort of directly translate the quite funny language of the areas of activity from the UK PSF at times. And as I say, we've actually gone on to use this with our more broader offer of fellowship support as well. Because that's what it should mean. That the language used in the document from James and his colleagues is exactly what it should say. And I have actually fed this forward at some program leader events with Advanced HE that, we need to make this language more accessible, because that's the main thing that puts people off. It's not the process, it's the language, and it's how do I speak in that way. And it doesn't require people to speak in that way. It doesn't have to be dressed up fancy language at all. So as I say, we've had a good number of successful claims going through. These technical staff, we're in the process of contacting them and asking them if we can use them as institutional exemplars so that other technical staff can then see successful ones. And we want to roll this workshop offer out sort of at least once per year to try and get a good crop of people coming through this each time. And I know when we first started talking about this, Natalie and I wanted to bring technical staff back into the delivery of that workshop offer. So then, those who are looking to climb up from associate to fellow or from fellow to senior fellow, they get that experience of doing a little bit more teaching, but also influencing colleagues as well. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say with regards to my bit and MMU. So I'll hand back over now for any questions or anything that Natalie would like to add to that.
Before we have a look at the questions, Chris and James, I just want to kind of interject here a little bit about what we did at MMU and totally agree with what you were saying, Chris. It was, from a technical services perspective, where I come from, it's my intention that, we would get most technicians within our service through this at some point. We've got 200 staff and there's very, very few of those that would actually not be right for this program, and that as an institution be able to get so many staff onto the program and accredited is really powerful. It's powerful for us as a service, and it's also really powerful for MMU as well. And I think from a student perspective, being able to demonstrate that we've got a high percentage of technical staff that are accredited to Advanced HE Fellowship, it's great for them as well. I agree with both of you about kind of demystifying this. I think years ago it was really scary, wasn't it? And if you were a technician, and I remember looking at this years ago, and I was in a more hands-on technical role and thinking, goodness, this looks really difficult. Should I do it or should I not? And then I moved roles, so I never did complete it. But the way that James and his team have put together that guidance, and with yourself, Chris, and working with both of you, it's really easy. And I'd just like to say that as a technical person, this should take you no more than half a day to actually write. It would be a full half day, but you can do it in half a day. And there's no sort of redoing it at any point. Once you've got it, you've got it. And as Chris and James said, you start off with your associate if that's where you want to come in at, and you can progress to quite high up with it. I think it's principal, isn't it? I think it's the highest one. And again, technical staff are able to achieve that level of accreditation. And I think it's becoming more and more evident to technical staff that this is something that they can really achieve. And, you know, it's my intention that, you know, over the next few years, we will get more and more technicians coming through this programme. And it's what
it's like you say, Natalie, you know, it's not even half a day. I mean, we got our people through in 3 hours, you know, and I would say that an hour and a half of that was actually writing.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, it can take longer than that, and it can take less than that, depending on how quick and how freely people can write. But what's wonderful about the document that James and his colleagues have put together is that it shows it doesn't have to be this fancy, over the top, overly verbose sort of. It's not an academic journal article. It's a recognition of the work that people do. That's all it needs to be. If you're doing the work, then the recognition should be easy.
It should. And I think I'm sorry, James, just before I pass over to you, I think one of the great things about how we tackled it was that we got those individuals together as a group. And because they were a group, they sparked ideas off each other, and we worked as a team, and it was dead easy. And I think that's the way to take it forward. And I think people will get more engagement if they're there as a team. You know, it's more difficult to kind of flunk out of it, isn't it? And, you know, we haven't got all our technicians through from that first cohort, but I've been really pleased with the amount of individuals that we have. And I know the ones that haven't done it yet, they've got very valid reasons for not doing it. You know, they've been tied up with the start of term and a couple of things on and off. So I fully anticipate that everyone we got through in those sessions will actually translate into actual fellowships.
In the next 12 months, I would guess.
As well,
I would say easily, because they've done 90% of it. It's just the finishing touches that understandably have just had to take a little bit of a pause for now.
Absolutely. James, sorry, I cut you off almost there. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say the other thing is it's not like a one-hit wonder. I failed it the first time. Mine got turned down because I basically didn't answer one of the questions because I didn't understand it. So I went back to it and did it again. So it's not a case of kind of like, you know, oh, that's it. It's not for me. I can't achieve this. It's just a case of, again, it's about reflection about what you're doing. And I mean, we use words like research and scholarship in institutions, but scholarship is anything that contributes to your knowledge and how you approach showing something. That is scholarship, whether that be watching a peer run a process and think, oh, they did that really well, I'll take that on board. That's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering whether we've got any questions, Dara, in the chat for James.
Yes, we have, Nat. Yeah, so for Chris and James. I don't know if there's a question from Michelle about areas that you can use for your application. So I don't know, Michelle, do you want to unmute and ask your question directly?
So the question really was around, like, so lots of technicians train and teach other members of staff, and it's not necessarily students, and whether this would be applicable to the people who are doing that sort of teaching rather than that direct interaction with students.
Shall I take that one? Because my job is essentially a staff developer. You know, I'm an academic developer, and I would say that the majority, you know, well, not the majority, no, all of my team have some level of advanced HE fellowship. So as long as you're doing work that is classed as teaching, you know, and that doesn't have to be classed on a timetabling system as teaching, but it has to be sort of, you know, facilitating, delivering something to people. So it's not working in projects and in meetings per se. It's like if you facilitate some workshops, development workshops for staff, then that's teaching. But, you know, most of the people who, well, no, it's probably 99% of the people who run fellowship programs at institutions are people like me who only teach staff, you know, so it's absolutely fine. And we're all senior principal fellows or whatever. So yeah, I'm sure that would be absolutely fine, as long as the way that it was phrased within the application was, you know, that it was teaching staff, you know, as long as it uses the language of the document of teaching and learning, and, you know, you'd be fine. So I hope that helps, Michelle.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Yeah, there's also a kind of comment or question from Joanne H, who's asked, obviously she said, this is great. If your own university doesn't have this kind of group or team to walk and support people through the process. The question is back to NTDC or IST, and how we could further help people to write their applications or support their applications. So now I guess this is something together with James, as a specialist advisor, that potentially we could provide support for our partner institutions with some kind of workshop or support. I don't want to just drop you in that, James, but I'm just thinking of a way we can kind of expand this out, because obviously MMU, you've got a really good system there, and there is that support for staff who want to be involved. But if it's not there, potentially how could people, reach out for that?
I think what we could do is perhaps put some case studies up on the NTDC website, and I could get some of those from the technical staff at Manchester, and I'm sure James would be able to offer some of his colleagues from Newcastle as well. I know that when you created that document, James, you wanted it to be used, and it was in collaboration with other people. So potentially, we could put some resource on NTDC website to try and talk people through it, and maybe we could put on a small recording or something. That might help those individuals that don't have the kind of support that is on offer at Manchester and Newcastle. Don't know whether that helps. Hopefully it does.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of case studies already on the website as well that James kindly and a colleague at Sheffield's put forward just as examples. And we'll kind of have a look at using the document as well more widely for people.
You can request, organisations, institutions, etc., can request workshops from Advance HE themselves, because if your institution doesn't have its own scheme, then you'd be making a direct application to Advance HE themselves. So it might be worth it in your case, Joanne. Maybe you could ask your manager, your university, or wherever it is you work, if they could perhaps contact Advance HE with a view to paying them to come and do a couple of workshops on it. Or it's maybe something that this group could do as well. You could host something that was attended by quite a lot of people, get them to come and do a webinar, something like that.
Sounds
Thanks.
good.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, Joanne, that Joanne H, who posted the question, are you absolutely sure that your institution isn't signed up to Advance HE and has the support? Because the majority of institutions do, but I'm not clear on which institution you're from.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, can you hear me? I'm in a university. We do have the Advance HE, because obviously we've got the lecturers. I was just thinking of it being simplified from the technician's point of view, because we are put off from doing it as technicians.
Right.
There's no encouragement.
Okay.
So this lecture has been great. It really has. It's opened my eyes.
That's really good. Is your institution signed up to the technician commitment?
Yes.
I would encourage you to speak to your technician commitment lead, because this is all part of the technician commitment. It's about raising that visibility and having that channel for career progression. So have a chat with them and see what they say. They might be able to help you out there.
Okay. Yeah, it might be that ultimately, if I get this, once I'm on this ladder, hopefully, I can start being the contact person for our university at technical level, that sort of thing. Not confident enough in it at the moment, but if I get through it, then it's step one, isn't it?
It is.
Joanne, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. If they don't feel comfortable doing that, or they've not done it before, then you can ask the group that run your PSF scheme. They can contact me and we can have a chat and collaborate on something as well.
Thank you, Chris.
So,
that's great.
No problem.
Thanks.
I would say as well that with more technicians doing it, there's more critical mass of people to pull on from our profession. So that's what's happening at Newcastle. There's no formal technicians supporting technicians, but it's just a case of, can I grab a cup of coffee with you here and chat through it there? So I think back to what Natalie was saying about technician commitment thing, I would, it's not a carrot on a string. It's kind of like a real easy win deliverable to meet, people's action plans. So they should be having it in there, and using other examples of like MMU running these workshops is brilliant to kind of not guilt, but show what good practice is within other institutions and try and make your institution do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, James. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Thanks, Joanne. We have got another question from Sahil Mihal. He's asking, I don't know if you want to unmute, Sahil, and ask directly about the number of technicians who've gone through this process.
Yeah, hi, Chris and James. Thanks for this presentation. Very useful indeed. Do you guys know the number of technicians that have gone through this process here in the UK and or abroad, or is this a hidden secret?
It's a really good, that is a really good question. And typically, as I'm sure you'll understand, they don't tend to split it across, you know, because the distinctions and the lines are very localized, you know. So what defines someone as a technical member of staff in one institution might not in another. There's a few research papers out there that have got more specific stats on that. I'll try and dig one out in a second for you. But I think they say it's sort of 50% of all academic or academic related. But, you know, speaking frankly, significant majority of the people who go for fellowship or associate fellowship or above tend to be in roles like mine, or they do tend to be technical staff, third space staff, simply because, you know, I think there's something around, it probably doesn't apply to everyone here, but I know I got my senior fellowship and my fellowship when I was in that third space, when I was a study skills tutor. And something about validating myself as an educator, you know, of being seen on the same footing as others. So you tend to find that those groups are more committed to doing it, whereas what you tend to find with your traditional academics is, unless they're going for promotion, they just get it through a PG cert, like PGC type thing, when they join the university anyway. So I'll try and dig that paper out and forward it on in a moment. But
I think Chris and James, and for colleagues in this room, everyone, gauging and sort of getting a feel for the numbers will really resonate and have a powerful impact in terms of, you know what, I want to be on that boat too. I can feel it makes a difference. And without numbers, all too often, whether it's to do with, you know, numbers here with the Advanced HE recognition scheme, or indeed any of the other sort of membership based recognition or accreditation, it's a tough call, because it seems for many technicians that it's a far distant cry from me doing my quintessential technical job role activities as compared to academically related, or, as you mentioned early on, technologists, and all these weird and wonderful titles that I've seen over the course of 30 years. None of it really homes in to me as a technician in the lab, supporting teaching, doing research. And so if we can showcase with numbers, I think we can get a better level of engagement, that's all.
it's a completely fair point. Completely agree. I think that's where you drop the mic and walk away there.
I don't want you to do that. You've done a fantastic job.
You know,
I'll mute my video and audio.
But it is one of those things, isn't it? You know, no one tells you how many in each sort of role people have. So I'm on a network. I can ask that question and try and get that information. So I'll see what I can do.
Yeah,
thanks.
To know that.
I think that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Just thinking about the partner affiliate people that we've got in the room, if any of you have undertaken the skills survey, the technical skills survey that we've been running, that institutions can get involved with, I think it's in there as a question, actually. You know, do you have HE, Advanced HE, change the name, fellowship? So there is data that we can pull out of those surveys, to be honest. It's not exhaustive, obviously, but there maybe is something that we can do as the NTEC to try and poll people to see how many technical staff have got Advanced HE fellowship. That might be something that we can shine a bit of a light on. I think it's one of those things where it's growing and numbers will grow. And it's about demonstrating impact, isn't it? You know, for us at MMU, it's one of our actions on our technician commitment pledge, and we have to report back to a very senior level, to our COO's level, really. So for us, there is a driver for that, and that in turn means that the university are getting something out of us, the students are getting something out of us. So it's just going on that journey to show the whole picture, I think, really. And once people start to cotton on to that way of thinking, I think it'll take off. I hope so anyway. It will at MMU. I mean, I'm really confident that our technical staff will come through this, and we'll get lots and lots of technicians through that programme. Have faith, everyone.
Natalie, can I make a comment and ask another question?
Yeah, of course.
Right, so I think it's absolutely right to link it through to the technician commitment, because that's directly applicable. But actually, if you think about it, organisations, HE institutes should be looking at this in terms of their overall strategy as well, because all of them will have the student experience at the heart of that. Yeah. And the business model is to increase student numbers, increase the student experience. So actually, it's not just the technician commitment, it's the overall university strategy. It should be looking at this as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my other question was, so I've just been on to Advanced HE, and I can see that there are two routes to getting the fellowship. One is where you go through an accredited programme, and the other is where you apply directly. Is this aligned with an accredited programme, or is it where you're applying directly? And the reason I asked that question is because there appears to be a cost associated if you apply directly.
Chris, you could probably answer this one better than I can.
Yeah, so the work we're doing at MMU is through our accredited programme, and because of that, it's completely free of cost to everyone involved. Whereas there is, I can't remember what the fee is exactly, but it's not a small fee if you go directly to Advanced HE. So that's where, you know, if you are in an institution where it's quite closed, you know, like we were talking about with Joanne in terms of how it's pitched to technical staff, then it's worth having conversations with them to open it up, because otherwise you'll probably end up applying directly, costing yourself quite a bit of money. And ultimately, there is nothing in the PSF at any level that says you have to be in a specific role or contract. It's about the work itself. So there's no reason why any unit who runs a PSF scheme, you know, an accredited program or anything like that, there's no reason why any of them could possibly say, I'm sure they wouldn't, but there's no reason why anyone could possibly say to any member of technical staff, you know, this isn't for you, because there is nothing in the documentation anywhere that says that. And that needs to be made very clear.
So at the University of Nottingham, where I work, it is open to technicians, and they explicitly say it's open to technicians. But the reason I brought it up is because our accredited programme is actually quite long, and you've been describing it as it takes 3 hours. Whereas if you want to achieve that at the University of Nottingham, you've got to go on 4 workshops, you've got to produce quite a lot of documentation. So that is potentially a barrier for technicians who don't have the time to do it.
Well, it might be worth seeing with them if it's one of those institutional you have to's, you know, where it's an unspoken thing where it's compulsory, but it's not really compulsory, you know, whereby they strongly encourage people to go through the 4 workshops. The documentation will be what it has to be. You know, if your university is accredited where you have to produce quite a lot of evidence, then that's unfortunately the hoop you got to jump through. But in my experience, it's not. And I've worked at a place where prior to MMU, where there were a number of workshops that you were supposed to go to, but it's only when someone didn't that they found out they didn't have to, if that makes sense. I'm not saying deliberately don't go to this stuff, because it should connect you with the community. It should give you opportunities to learn from other people and to ask questions. But, you know, I'm sure they'll be okay with you going if you can only make 2 of the 4. I'm sure they'll still allow you to submit. They can't stop you, basically, would be my experience of that, somewhat provocatively.
I think that's really interesting, and I think that will be a challenge if we're trying to do this across the UK.
But it might be worth doing something like, you know, speaking to the team that do that, you know, and maybe doing something like what Natalie and I have done, where we were inspired by the language of James's document to make this more open, and ask that team who run the PSF thing to maybe come and put those sessions on for your staff during regular meeting times. You know, if you have times where you pull people together in groups or something like that, then it can be done there and then. You know, it doesn't have to be something that they miss a class for or anything like that, you know. So
yeah, Really
there's more
useful, thank you.
flexibility than you might think. Challenge them is what I would say.
So I will.
And
I'll
show
go
them
back
it's
and
an
challenge.
opportunity for them as well to get their numbers up. You know,
Yeah.
it looks great for everyone, whether it's done with noble intentions or cynical intentions. It looks great for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I'll go back to them. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think we're about, well, we're a little bit over actually. So if anyone's got anything else that they want to ask around Advanced HE, you can either get in touch with me, or Chris has put his email address in there, or NTDC directly, and we'll be very pleased to help you. So lastly, just to say a really big thank you to Chris and James for their time today. It's been a really interesting session. I think everyone's gone away with lots to think about.